Just a couple of housekeeping notes for you. That we will be recording this webinar for future viewing on the OGS website. And that way we'll be able to watch it in the event that you can't make it to the webinar today. Also, I'd like to ask you to please mute yourself if you haven't done so already. If not, I can also mute you from where I am here. I'm very happy today to bring to you a webinar by OGS librarian Linda Swanson. Linda has been here for a while, and we are happy to have her. She is a digital librarian by her training, and so she is the best person qualified to talk to you about what we're going to talk about today. So without any further ado, I am going to turn it over to Linda, and I'll let her begin her presentation.
Great, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. On my screen here, it does say that I'm the Library Collections Manager here at Ohio Genealogical Society, which I really just say that I'm the librarian here. But in 2019, Ohio Genealogical Society did hire me to be their digital librarian. And I was actually promoted when Tom Neal retired in 2021. But as Noel said, I'm still trained as a digital librarian. That's really my expertise as far as librarianship goes. And I wanted to talk a little bit today, pages to pixels, to talk about the process of digitization, and in particular, the process of digitization here at the Ohio Genealogical Society. We have to, it's a little more complicated than just scanning a bunch of pages. We have to here find the right balance between the time that it takes, the cost that it takes, and also keeping in mind some best practices when it comes to creating digital resources, and then especially the digital resources that we want to share online to our members and to the people that visit our website. At the same time, once we bother to do the work of creating all of these digital assets, we need to create them in a way that we can preserve them for the future. We have to keep these little bits and bytes working for a long time so that we don't have to keep going back and rescanning things for the future. So I'm going to just kind of walk you through a little bit how OGS digitizes material, give you a little peek to some of the unseen work that goes on behind the process, and hopefully this will give you some ideas if you are interested in digitizing your own personal documents. It'll give you some guidelines. So the first thing we have to think about when digitizing here at OGS is copyright. A lot of people don't realize that I am not allowed to copy a book that is currently under US copyright. That would be a violation. Just as if you were making a copy on a copy machine, I can't just make it digital just because I own it. So we have to determine the copyright. Right now, in general, kind of a big overview, published works 1927 and earlier are actually in the public domain. And what that means is that they are no longer covered by copyright and that anybody can use them for any kinds of things that they want to do. We are at a time now in US copyright law where every single year there are more works that enter the public domain. So when January 1st comes here in 2024, all the works from 1928 will enter the public domain, and then therefore, for our case, be available for us to actually digitize, should we want to do so. So that's published works in the United States. I do want to mention that unpublished works actually have copyright protection in the United States. Right now, things that are unpublished are covered for the life of the author plus 70 years. So with a general date or a general idea, we're looking at authors who died before 1953. So if your authors are still alive or if they recently passed away, their unpublished works still enjoy some copyright protection in the United States. And then I just threw up there for things that are published anonymously or corporate authorship, something where you wouldn't know when the author died, or the author can't die because it's a corporation. It's 120 years from the date of creation. So unpublished works created before 1903. This is just a glimpse into copyright law. Copyright law is very complicated in that over the decades, there have been a variety of different laws in effect. And so copyright covers the things from the time that the law was often at the time that the item was either published or created. So you have to kind of really consider whether or not things are still covered by copyright. And here at OGS, I am more willing to assume it's copyrighted than not. So I'm only going to digitize things that I feel comfortable are no longer protected by copyright. So what this means is, like, I don't know, if you were a member of one of our local chapters and you went out and you read Tombstones in like 1972 and you published a book, just know I cannot digitize that book for 95 years from the date of publication. So I do have a number of people that come to the OGS library and ask, hey, have you just about digitized everything there? First, we have 70,000 volumes, but second, the large majority of our collection I cannot digitize because it is covered by copyright. So what do we do here at OGS? Well, we ask for permissions to digitize items. We may actually come and ask your local chapter. We have a program called 8 for 88. It's actually kind of a goal, and our goal is to get 8 copyrighted works that cover all of the 88 counties in the state of Ohio, like 8 for each county, so that we have a good representation on our website of documents for and resources for people to use. So also, if people are donating stuff to OGS, maybe you wrote your family history or you created your family genealogy and you'd like to share it with OGS, we often at the time ask if you would consider allowing us to digitize it, or maybe you give it to us already digitized for putting on our website. We don't have to have your copyright, but if you give us permission to share it, then we certainly can. So the next thing, now we've determined that copyright is fine, we have to choose some formats, and we have to think about quality controls. So when different types of information and different types of resources it come with different considerations when you're deciding how to digitize something. So handwritten items are different than typed or typeface items. Pictures are definitely different than just doing straight up text. Color copies versus grayscale copies create a whole different set of challenges. So the kinds of things that we think about when we are deciding how to actually best scan something, there are things like, bit depth, color modes, whether or not this is, it's a lot easier to do something like that printed text on this picture, that grid it is a lot easier because it's much more uniform than, say, the handwriting up above, which obviously has shading and tones to it, and some of the text is darker and some of it's lighter, even within the same word. That's just what happens when you actually write. So we take these things into consideration, and every time we scan something, we set it up for the best control for that particular document. And we actually can do test scans and color checks and things like that with our actual equipment to just make sure that we're capturing the best image possible. And also, it also tests whether or not so the manufacturers of scanners tell us, oh, it does this, that, or the other thing. And sometimes that's not 100% what comes out the other end. So there's a way to kind of test to see if the quality of the image that you are scanning, and if it works best for that type of instance. So there are guidelines for these. They're not rules and regulations, but they're guidelines. And here, the most popular is to follow the Federal Agency Digital Guidelines Initiative, or FADGI. FADGI creates technical guidelines for the digitizing of cultural heritage, which definitely covers the things that we do here at OGS. So these are guidelines to create the best scans that we can to capture the original document as closely as possible, but and also to preserve these formats or these digital resources into the future. And you can kind of see there, there's a lot to the guidelines, but I gave you an example there. You can see a performance level. You can see there's like a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, a 4-star. So there's a list of things that you can do to make a 1-star quality scan as opposed to a 4-star quality scan. And sometimes either because of time, the equipment that you own, the
Yeah, I'm pretty upset with her.
I don't know how I feel about all that.
So I meant
Hey,
some-
Linda, I think you're muted for some reason. Can you unmute yourself?
Hold on.
am I on now?
Yep, you're back. Thanks.
Oh,
Sorry,
I'm so
don't know what
sorry.
happened. Nope, don't
Okay.
know what happened.
Anyways, so these guidelines, sometimes it's not always feasible to get a 4-star scan because it takes a lot of time and effort, and you have to prepare your atmosphere that you're capturing your scans in. Sometimes, some of these other, their goals is what I'm saying. So not everybody is scanning to 4-star quality, but they are goals. You can see there maybe that it says the master file format. That's definitely something I want to talk about. The standard for master file formats are TIFFs, PDFAs, which is not to be confused with a regular PDF. It's a PDF archival format, and JPEG 2000s, which are different than regular JPEGs. And TIFF in general is the archival standard for creating digital assets. Again, you create what you can with the equipment that you have, but that's the goal, is to create TIFFs because of the kind of format they are. And that's when we got to talk about ideas like the difference between proprietary formats or closed formats versus open formats or non-proprietary formats. TIFFs, JPEGs, 2000s, and PDFAs are all rather open, meaning that there's no single entity that 100% owns it and controls that particular document format. So, for instance, when you create a Microsoft Word document and you save it as a Word document, that file format itself is actually owned by Microsoft. So, if Microsoft goes under, or Microsoft decides to ever change it or control it, like, they still own it. It's not something that is necessarily 100% open to the public. So that's why we choose a file format that is an open format, meaning that computer programmers and people that deal with computers, they can see under the hood, and they know how that particular document works, and also they know that TIFFs and the JPEG 2000 and PDFAs, there are entities out there that are working to make sure that these kinds of documents always work into the future. So if you've ever created a family tree on something like Family Tree Maker, and suddenly you can't open it anymore unless you have Family Tree Maker, that's the kind of situation that we're talking about. These are the kind of formats that can work in a wide variety of areas. We also have to talk about lossy versus lossless formats, and they kind of sound exactly the way the words are. Lossy versus lossless. Lossy loses information, lossless doesn't lose information. And the best way that I can describe this to people is when it comes to TIFFs and other kinds of image documents, there's lots of little what we call DPI or PPI. PPI is points per inch. DPI stands for dots per inch. They basically mean the same thing, but PPI is usually comes from the computer world, and DPI actually kind of comes from the copier world, but it actually kind of means the same thing. And what it means is it's kind of like a pointillism painting. So here on this slide, I shared with you one of the most popular pointillism paintings there is. A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte by Serrant. And when you back away from the picture, you can see, all these people enjoying the water side there in the park. But if you dial way down in, you can see that that particular young lady is actually created of lots of little dots and lots of little points of color. So like when you go really close, you can see it's all created of points, but when you back away, your eye allows you to see the overall image that that's a girl sitting on in the grass. I gave you another example here that is a map that actually is an image, a digital image. When you back away from the map, you can see that the map there, you can see that there's probably some water there, there's probably some land masses there, some roads, some little dots that represent towns and things like that. But when you dial really in, or you blow up the image and look really, really close, you can see on the right that this is actually, the image is actually created of lots of little boxes of information. So those little pixels all represent, a particular shade of color. You can see that what looks like a black circle outline is actually not 100% a circle outline, but actually created of a lot of little boxes, and some of them shade to gray, and some of them are solid black. Now, when it comes to lossy versus lossless formats, what a lossy format does is compresses or makes the document smaller by removing some of those little pixels that you see there, the ones that repeat. So if you're looking at that yellow part of the screen, you can see there's a whole bunch of pixels that are all basically the same color. They're the same kind of information. You can actually go in there and take out every other pixel. And when you back away from the image still looks good. It will still look like what's on the left. But when you dial down, you can see that information has actually been lost. And that's why TIFFs are the standard when it comes to creating digital assets for those master files, because they create really big documents because they store all of the information. Whereas something like a JPEG, a regular JPEG, removes some of the information to make the file smaller. And we all know why we want smaller files, because it makes it easier for us to deal with them, to upload them, to download them, to open them. They're just a little easier to work with. But when it comes to actually really saving those master files, we need those really big TIFFs with all that information. So here at OGS, the next thing we do when we're ready to scan, we know what we're going to scan it like, we know what it's going to look like. We actually create a face sheet for all of our documents here. We want to first identify that it came from our digital library. We also want to, give you the title and give you the author and all that kind of information. We almost always try to give you a location, because as you know, as genealogists, location is very, very important when you're looking into your ancestors. We usually typically give you a little paragraph about what you're looking at, what it is, how it works, or where the information came from. And we usually end it with a paragraph that talks about how you are allowed to use that material. We typically open it up to our members to use it for their genealogy and their personal needs, but we have not opened it up for commercial use and things like that. So what that means is we are saying that we own the scan of that, as opposed to not, whether or not we own the information in the scan. What we're saying is the scan itself is something that OGS created. So we always keep those original raw files that we made, those original big TIFF files that we made, including this face sheet. After we create the scans, we actually need to name the files. So we can't just have a whole bunch of scans out there where the title of them doesn't make any sense, or the titles can be confusing as far as not understanding exactly what the document is. So when I started working here at the Ohio Genealogical Society, I created a naming scheme for all of our documents. And this is something you might keep in mind when you create your own. How do you know what actually is in a particular scan? So I gave us a couple examples here of our naming scheme. The first one at the top starts with OGS and a bunch of zeros and 15796. What that actually is, that OGS number, that's actually the barcodes that we have here. I'm sure you're familiar with your local library where you have those barcodes, you scan it when you check out and things. We have those barcodes in most of our books here at OGS. And what is wonderful about those barcodes is that they are a unique identifier, meaning there is only one of that number, of that barcode that exists in this building. So when I use that as part of the naming scheme, I know that it's only, these files can't get confused with each other. You start off with that number, you know all those files have something to do with this particular work. Also, when I was creating this naming scheme, it was important to me that when anybody is working with our digital files, that we could actually identify the book or find it on our shelf without having to look the book up in another way. So part of our naming scheme here, you can see in that first one, it says OH, that stands for Ohio, and the next letters are HS. And if you attended my talk about our call numbers, or if you've ever visited the Ohio Genealogical Society, you know that we use little abbreviations to kind of indicate in general what that work is about. So HS stands for history. You know, we have things like LR for land records, AT for atlases, and so on and so forth. So that HS, I know by working here, that stands for history. And 1913, I always try to put a date on things so that we know like which edition or which time period we're talking about. And then it ends with Ohio Valley Flood, which is probably in the title of the work, but also tells you a little bit about what it's about. So with that information, within 5 minutes, I can go out to our collection in the main library and I can actually find that book. And I know it's specifically that book because I can match up the actual barcode. So the next one is a little different. It says DIG-LFS and a bunch of zeros and 11. So what this tells me right away is that this is a digital asset, and LFS stands for loaned for scanning. So what that means is somebody loaned this to us so we could make digital copies of it, but they kept it, or the OGS does not own the actual original physical resource. So it exists in our library here only as this digital file. So that prevents me from going to look for it in the regular stacks. The FH in it stands for family history, and the next word is long. So what that means to me is that this is a family history about the surname Long, and that the title probably is Simon Peter, Lord of Life, something is in the title of that particular work. The next one down says DIG-OBJ, that stands for digital object. What that means is that this item has only ever existed as a digital object, meaning it was donated, or in this case, this was donated to OGS as a digital file itself. There was never a physical book. This was created on a computer. And if you look at this, you can see it says OH Summit. So I know that it's an Ohio Summit County work, and MR stands for marriages. And then you've got some dates there, 1840, 1865 grooms. So right away, you know that we don't own this. It was always a digital object, and that it is about marriages for that time period and probably indexed by grooms. For the last example there, one that starts with MSS, it says 84F1. MSS means that it is a manuscript here at OGS. So this is something that is in our archive collection. And I can tell right away that this is going to be our archive collection number 84. And that happens to be the F stands for file. So it's going to be file number 1. So I can go into our archive. I can actually pull this particular file by using those numbers, but also I gave a little bit of information. It's Ohio, it covers Ashland County, and CH would stand for church records. And there's the date range for them, and the churches or the location is probably Seymour's Run. So we have to think a little bit about naming our files, and so that we can organize the information here at OGS. You know, we now have thousands of things that have been digitized, and we have to be able to find these things on our computers and on our servers and on other places that we save them, and in order to be able to manage them and to know what we have already digitized and where and how we are taking care of it. So naming schemes are kind of important if you ever want to find a file again. Okay, so now we've scanned it, we've named it, it's all good. Now we need to store it. And here at Ohio Genealogical Society, we store files in numerous places. There's the LOCKSS idea, LOCKSS. This is actually like an industry kind of term, and it stands for lots of copies keep stuff safe. So you don't want just one copy of your scanned item on one computer, because what if something happens to that computer? Or you don't want it on one thumb drive because thumb drives can fail. You want to keep lots of copies in case that document ever gets corrupted or edited or changed in any way. You want to know that you have another copy out there that actually is still the original. So we store them here in OGS in a couple different ways. We do have servers that are virtual, meaning the server is not in this building, but is at another site. The company that manages our servers for us make copies of our servers. So there's a couple different copies that they have themselves. We also store our files on external drives, like you can see that Seagate picture there. I do like external drives better than like thumb drives or USB drives. They're a little more stable. They're also bigger. As well as when we upload the items to our website keeps a copy of it. And our website actually, there is an actual the website management company actually has a copy of the website too. So there's multiple copies of the website. And then in general, I usually also keep them on a computer here at OGS. So not only are they in different locations, they're on different kinds of equipment, like the cloud, which our server kind of is, but you could save something to the cloud as well as your physical computer, as well as other, those external drives that aren't always have to be connected to a computer, therefore not always exposed to the internet. A variety of copies in a variety of ways in a variety of places is the best solution. So we talked about those master files that we create, those TIFFs that are really, really big and enormous. Of course, when you use our website, you're typically not looking at TIFFs. You're typically looking at PDFs. We have other file formats too, but most of our stuff is PDF. This is what we call a surrogate file. So you create that master file and you put it away and tuck it away and don't mess with it anymore. Don't open it a lot. Don't look at it a lot. Leave it alone so it stays healthy. But create a copy, create a surrogate file. And that's the files that we use when we present them online. So these kind of surrogate files, they can be JPEGs, they can be, they can be TIFFs too, but that's a little large. But most of the time they're PDFs. These are the ones that we use, that we crop and we edit them. We might straighten it a little bit if it got scanned crooked. This is how we do our quality checks. We look to see if the image is clear. We make sure that we got every single page, because sometimes digitizing can be a little tedious when you're doing a book with hundreds of pages. So we make sure we have every page. It's also at this point where we do the optical character recognition, or we OCR the document. And what that does is it allows the computer to try to recognize the text and therefore make it searchable. So like when you are looking for information on particular words, the computer has actually identified those words within the document. Keep in mind, OCR works really, really well for typed face and printed material. It does not work at all for handwriting right now. It's not, especially like old handwriting, which a lot of our stuff is. So that's not something that is capable of doing. And then with these surrogate files, we also optimize them. And that's another lossy idea. We tell the computer, hey, let's make this as tight or as small as a document as possible. That's still a quality document for people to read online. And we do that simply so that you can upload and download them and open them much faster. We are also limited by our website vendor that our documents have to be under 50 megabytes. So sometimes when you're on the OGS website, if you see something that says, this is part 1 of 2 or something like that, it's probably because I had to split the book simply because the file was way too large. So keep that in mind when you're looking around. So the next thing that we have to do is something called metadata. And a lot of people aren't familiar with metadata, but metadata is data about data. And what we mean by that is we have created this digital resource. It has information or it has data in it. And now we're going to create more data about it to describe or to enhance this particular image and digital resource that we've created. So when I came to OGS, I did create what we call a metadata schema. I decided the ways that we were going to describe the works that we digitize. And there's three kinds of data that is typically in metadata. You can see it's descriptive, structural, and administrative. So the descriptive metadata is basically for discovery and identification. This is how we help you find the information that you're looking for. When you're like, hey, I'm only looking for marriage stuff, and you click that filter on our website, that's part of the metadata behind it that tells the computer that that's what this particular work is about. The structural stuff is really all about the physical parts of the document itself, the date that we digitized it, the format that it's digitized in, how big the file is, and then some of that provenance stuff you can see there where we document every time we edit a particular resource, so we can, we know how it has been changed over time. We actually keep track of that. And then the administrative metadata is like access rights and the things that you see at the bottom of the list here. It's all about like how we allow you to use it, whether or not it's copyrighted, and the fact that we are the rights holder to the creation of that particular digital resource. So there, like making the scans, there's also standards for this. We follow the NISO standards, which is an entity called the National Information Standards Organization. And the reason that there are standards for it is because when you have a standard, then our metadata can talk to other metadata on other computers, and the computers understand that we are talking about particular kinds of information. So this particular metadata schema is based on something called Dublin Core, which is a minimum set of information suggested or standardized for the description of digital resources. So now we got all of that done. Now we're ready to upload our document to our website. We upload them. Our website is ogs.org, which you probably know. Most of our digital assets are under something called genealogy resources. So there you'll find our digitized books, our digitized manuscripts, and also our own periodicals, of the OGN and the OGSQ that we publish underneath genealogy resources. And you can see there all those little boxes. Each one of those boxes is another digital asset. If you are a logged in member, those little buttons turn red and say view if you want to open the document online. And then, of course, we talked about how the metadata allows you to use the filters down the side to kind of pare down your search so that you're only looking at the kinds of information that you seek. And as well as there's that search box, which actually can read the OCR'd information within the document itself. So that's kind of what it all takes to finally get it on our website for you to use, as well as for us to preserve into the future. And what does this mean to you? Well, here is my recommendation. If you are digitizing your own thing, I would create TIFFs. I would do 600 PPI or at least 300 PPI. Remember, PPI and DPI are pretty much interchangeable, but you want to gather lots of information. This is going to make very big scans, so you need to be able to have places to store them. They're going to make big files. Store them on portable external hard drives, or at least UBS flash drives. Don't just have it only on your computer. Make at least 4 copies and try to spread those copies out. Store them in a variety of ways, like the cloud versus your computer versus a flash drive or an external hard drive, as well as different spaces. Put one in a lockbox, give one to your sister-in-law, but spread your stuff out so it's not all in the same building. And then use your surrogate files, create copies that are JPEGs and PDFs so that you can use them on your phones and your tablets and your mobile devices, and you can upload it to Family Search or put it on your Ancestry. So use those surrogate files to share. So that's pretty much the whole explanation. I'm open to any questions that anybody has.
Linda, I have a question that came in on the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it for you if you don't mind.
Okay.
Do you have a specific, this is from Richard Holter. Thank you, Richard, for the question. Do you have a specific program you use to add or edit the metadata? Does it allow for bulk edits of metadata, such as when digitized, who digitized, types of files, etc.?
We don't right now. I basically use Excel spreadsheets to store that information. That was a copy of my Excel spreadsheet. When we upload information to something like our website or some kind of other platform, there's an easier way to kind of store that. There's a way to submit that information, and in particular, it puts it in a way that can be shareable among computers. But in general, as we're creating it, we are doing it in an Excel spreadsheet. So any of kind of the bulk things that you can do on Excel, you can do. That's what you can do if you want to do bulk things.
Elaine would like to know what kind of scanner we're using at OGS right now.
So we have two types of scanners. When it comes to just straight print documents, especially books that are many hundreds of pages big, we actually use our Konica Minolta printer scanner copier. That is not a like a great standard as far as the, we talked about those kind of goals that we had for guidelines for creating great things, but they work best for what we have because so much of our stuff is typewritten. But then probably our workhorses are the ones that really do the kind of scans that are archival and able to store really well. We do those on we have Epson scanners. We haven't we've owned it for several years, but it's still kind of the workhorse here at OGS, and it's a little slower, but it's definitely much better for things like images, pictures, and that kind of stuff.
Ann Wagner would like to know that if I submit a DVD of my lineage or family history, does the copyright follow?
Did you create it is the first question. If you submit it, so we do have forms that we have a deed of gift as well as an electronic data form that we require with donations to OGS. Just collect some information about how the document was created. And you also at that point get to decide if you are signing copyright over to OGS or you're just simply giving us permission to share it online. OGS doesn't necessarily need your copyright. If you want to give it to us, great. Maybe we'll print it in the future or something. But really, I just really am seeking your permission to share it online. And we can definitely talk about all that stuff at the time of donation.
If anybody has, oh, here we go. Diana, to scan, do we use a flatbed or something special?
Does OGS use something special? Right now, we have flatbed scanners. We do not own a book scanner at this time or something like that. We would like to, but we do.
It's on our wish list.
Yeah, and actually, we have access to things that we need. So even if we don't have it here in the building, sometimes you don't need to own the equipment. You just need to have access to the equipment. So in the state of Ohio, and actually Ohio is a really good state when it comes to your LAMs, your libraries, your archives, and your museums. We have all kinds of support from our government in particular in this state, and we should be really proud of that. What we have here in the state are local hubs where you can go that have the latest and greatest equipment, where you can go, even you guys can go and make your own scans. And so that, does OGS need to purchase things, or do we just need access to things? That's a question we ask ourselves all the time.
Anne has a question. What happens if our images are already JPEGs? Can they be made into TIFFs from JPEGs? Can we
Sure.
use, okay. So they can, will there be a loss of quality?
Yes, you've already
Okay.
lost the quality.
Okay.
It will never be better than what it already is. So now don't beat yourself up. If you did a lot of JPEGs and things like that, don't be too hard on yourself, because most scanners or most things are defaulted or set up to create JPEGs, because it is a file format that's very popular and that works on a lot of different in a lot of different software, a lot of different internet sources and things like that. So don't beat yourself up. Converting things, you can't create more information than what is already there. So I say, if you created a JPEG, that's fine. Don't worry about it. If you want to try to create a TIFF, I would encourage that, but you'd have to go back and do a new scan.
Anne also asked, can we use copyrighted material in family books not meant for sale?
I will refer you to the US copyright. Okay, if you are not selling it, so there is a fair use portion to the copyright law in the United States. Fair use allows individuals like yourselves to copy a portion of a book or a portion of something else for your own personal use. So yes, if you are not publishing it for profit, it's just, hey, I made this and I want my sister and my brother and my nephew to have a copy, that should be fine. I will say I'm not a copyright attorney, so this is not a legal statement, but that is the point of the fair use clause in copyright, is that you are allowed to use information, parts of information, for your own personal use, education, and enjoyment.
Diana would like to know that if our wish came true for having a scanner other than the flatbed, what would be the best type for us?
I would do something with a book cradle, something that doesn't require me to open things up completely flat, but actually can be very supportive of the original work, especially our original Bibles, which can be incredibly big and heavy.
Do we have a preferred scanning software program that we use?
No. So, I mean, we just scan to the PDFs. We use the software that comes with the Epson printer. We don't have any other independent scanning software. We do edit our files when we create those surrogate files. We use Adobe Acrobat.
Eileen just wanted to let folks know that programs like Photoshop can convert any file type to something else, i.e. change the JPEG to TIFF. You can also, if you can't afford Photoshop, there is also a software program called GIMP, G-I-M-P, which is free open source software, which does the same thing.
But again, you can't create information that isn't already in it. So
I'm going to wait just a couple seconds if there are any other questions come in the chat. Okay, that was an awkward silence. I want to thank Linda for giving this presentation to us today for the OGS. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned, this is being recorded, so this will be available for later viewing on the OGS website. Our next webinar is scheduled for July 11th with Patrick McCracken of shipindex.org on conducting maritime research and using that for your genealogy research. I did get another question before we go. Did you state to scan it as big as possible versus smaller?
So in my recommendation here, the 600 PPI, that's big enough. I know you can do things bigger than that. Sometimes bigger isn't always better. You're not always gaining more by just continuing to use bigger and bigger PPI. Sometimes you get to a point where like that it's just not worth the space that it takes up anymore. So I would say 600 PPI is pretty much an industry standard. More than that is a little unnecessary. I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt, but just causes you to have to store really big files. And then I was also talking about, like, I kind of skimmed over it really quickly, but when we talk about things like bit depth and color schemes and stuff like that, those are other kinds, like it's just not bigger is better, but that what you collect is the right appropriate colors and the right appropriate bit depth and things like that, which is a different thing to think about. Maybe isn't something that like maybe you personally worry about when you're just doing your own stuff, because most of the time the scans come out pretty well, but it is something we take into consideration here.
You don't get to leave yet. How do you edit your copies for OCR? Is that done in Adobe?
It's done in Adobe. Also, our website also does it as well. When we upload it to the website, it actually does it again. That's just the nature of our website. But yeah, those are the products that we use.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I especially want to thank Linda for giving our presentation. Please keep an eye on our website, on our calendar on our website, where we upload all of our webinar schedules. There's always something going on with genealogy in Ohio. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope you all have a great day.